Savannah Montgomery, 32, stood in the empty funeral home, staring at her husband's casket. Her parents had chosen to attend her sister Melissa's engagement party, instead claiming it was more important for the family legacy. Little did they know that Savannah was now worth $5 million, money they'd desperately need when their carefully constructed world came crashing down just 3 months later. Before I dive into this wild story that changed my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy family revenge dramas where karma delivers the perfect justice. Trust me, you'll want to see how my parents learned that blood loyalty only matters when it benefits both sides. For as long as I can remember, my family presented itself as the picture-perfect American success story. My father, Richard Montgomery, built his real estate business from the ground up in our small Connecticut town, while my mother, Elizabeth, maintained her position as the queen of local social circles. Our colonial-style home on Maple Avenue hosted countless dinner parties where my parents showcased their achievements and their favorite daughter, my younger sister Melissa. I was always the practical one. While Melissa pursued dance and theater with our parents' enthusiastic financial backing, I studied finance and economics, paying my own way through college, with scholarships and part-time jobs. My parents never missed Melissa's recitals, but somehow had scheduling conflicts for my graduation ceremony. "It's just not as exciting as the arts, honey," my mother would say, patting my hand condescendingly. When I met James at a finance conference 6 years ago, it was like finding the missing piece of my soul. Unlike my family, James valued my intelligence and ambition. He was a quiet, thoughtful investment banker with kind eyes and a brilliant mind for market trends. We married within a year against my parents' subtle disapproval. They attended the wedding, of course appearances were everything, but their gift was noticeably less generous than what they'd spent on Melissa's sweet 16 party alone. James and I built our life together methodically. We worked hard, invested wisely, and created a loving home. We didn't flaunt our growing success, preferring to live below our means while building our portfolio. My parents, meanwhile, continued to favor Melissa, funding her series of failed business ventures, a boutique that closed after 6 months, a catering company that never secured a major client, and most recently, backing her fiancé Blake's revolutionary tech startup. What my family didn't know was that James and I had made several early investments in emerging technologies that had quietly grown exponential over the past few years. One particular investment in a medical technology company had recently been acquired by a pharmaceutical giant, resulting in an unexpected windfall of $5 million. We had planned to use that money to start a family of our own, maybe buy a vacation property where we could create memories with our future children. But life has a way of destroying even the most carefully laid plans. 3 months ago, James complained about persistent headaches. I insisted he see a doctor, expecting it to be nothing more than stress or eye strain. The diagnosis came like a wrecking ball: an aggressive brain tumor, inoperable with a prognosis of 3 months at most. Just like that, our future together was stolen. In those final weeks, as James deteriorated rapidly, my sister Melissa got engaged to Blake. My parents immediately threw themselves into planning an elaborate engagement party. When James passed away 2 months earlier than even the doctors had predicted, the engagement celebration was scheduled for the same weekend as the funeral. "We've already put down non-refundable deposits," my mother explained over the phone, her voice carrying that familiar tone of dismissal she'd always used with me. "Melissa has been planning this moment her whole life. Surely you understand we need to be there for her special day. You can handle the funeral arrangements on your own. You've always been so independent." I sat in stunned silence, the phone growing slick with sweat in my palm. My husband was dead, and my parents were choosing a party over his funeral. The truth crystallized for me in that moment. I had never truly been part of this family, not in the ways that mattered. Of course, I replied, my voice hollow. I understand completely. As I hung up the phone, something shifted inside me. The grief remained a gaping wound that would never fully heal, but alongside it grew something new, a cold, clear purpose. In that moment, I decided that understanding my family's true nature was the most valuable gift they had ever given me, and I would use that knowledge accordingly. The day of James' funeral arrived with cruel spring sunshine, as if the world hadn't just lost one of its best souls. I stood alone at the front of the small chapel we'd attended, occasionally greeting the modest gathering of mourners. James's colleagues from the investment firm, a few of our mutual friends, and his elderly aunt who had raised him after his parents died. Not a single member of my family was present. No parents, no sister, not even a cousin sent as a token representative. The empty seats reserved for family mocked me throughout the service. The minister, who barely knew us, spoke generic platitudes about loss and heaven, having only my hurried notes about James's life to guide him. I sat rigid, my black dress feeling too tight, too hot, as I clutched a handkerchief James had given me on our first anniversary. Meanwhile, across town at the Westbrook Country Club, my sister's engagement party was in full swing. I knew this because my mother's friend Caroline, who had actually shown up to support me at the funeral, had received the elaborate invitation with its gold foil lettering and request for festive cocktail attire. Caroline had declined the party to attend the funeral, instead an act of basic human decency that somehow made my family's absence all the more glaring. "Your mother posted photos an hour ago," Caroline whispered apologetically as we stood at the cemetery afterward. She showed me her phone, my parents beaming beside Melissa and her fiancé Blake, champagne flutes raised in a toast. My mother wore an expensive new dress in a shade of lilac she claimed was her signature color. My father had his arm around Blake, looking more proud than he'd ever looked at anything I'd accomplished. "It's fine," I lied, handing back her phone. They made their choice. That evening, alone in the home James and I had shared, I received a text from Melissa. "Sorry I missed the thing today. Hope it went okay. Mom said to tell you the salmon canapes were divine. Miss you." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began a series of carefully calculated moves. First, I transferred our joint investments into accounts solely in my name as we had arranged in James's final days. Then I called our lawyer Michael Greenberg, who had helped James update his will after the diagnosis. "Everything's in order, Savannah," Michael assured me. "The life insurance will be processed within the week. As for the investments, they're legally yours now. What do you plan to do with everything?" I smiled for the first time in days. "I'm thinking about the future, Michael. A different kind of future than James and I had planned." The following morning I received a voicemail from my mother. "Darling, the party was simply magical. Melissa was radiant. You should have seen Blake's parents. They brought her the most exquisite diamond bracelet as an engagement gift. Anyway, we're thinking of you, of course. Your father and I might stop by next weekend if we're not too busy with the wedding planner. Melissa's thinking June for the ceremony at the Plaza in New York. Isn't that fabulous?" Not a single question about the funeral. Not one word about James. I deleted the message and continued with my plan. Step 1 was already complete. I understood exactly where I stood with my family. Step 2 would take a bit more time, but I was nothing if not patient. After all, I'd waited my entire life for my parents' approval. I could certainly wait a few more months for something far more satisfying, their complete realization of what they had lost. 2 weeks after James's funeral, I was still moving through life in a fog of grief, punctuated by moments of cold clarity. I returned to work at the investment firm where James and I had both been employed, throwing myself into projects to keep my mind occupied. My colleagues were sympathetic, offering support without intrusion, a stark contrast to my family who had yet to visit me in person. My parents did, however, call twice more, not to check on my emotional well-being, but to ask if I would contribute to Melissa's wedding fund. "The plaza isn't cheap, darling," my mother explained, as if I was unaware of basic economics despite my finance career. "And you know your sister has always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. We thought, since you don't have as many expenses now with poor James gone, you might want to help make her day special." I remained non-committal, neither agreeing nor refusing outright. "I'll have to look at my finances," I told them. The funeral costs were significant. "Well, that was your choice to have such an elaborate service," my mother sniffed, though James's funeral had been modest by any standard. 1 month after the funeral, the news broke. Blake's tech startup, in which my parents had invested heavily, was being investigated for fraud. The revolutionary algorithm he'd claimed to develop was largely stolen code, and the company's financial projections had been wildly fabricated. The stock, which had briefly soared after an initial public offering, plummeted overnight. My father called me in a panic at 6:30 inches the morning. "Savannah, have you seen the news about Blake's company?" "I have," I replied calmly. In fact, I had suspected something was amiss with Blake's business model months ago, and had quietly warned James to stay far away from any investment opportunity they might offer us. "We're in trouble, Savannah. Serious trouble." My father's voice trembled, something I'd never heard before. "We put everything into that company. The business, our retirement accounts, even took a second mortgage on the house." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. My financially savvy father, who had built a successful real estate business, had violated the first rule of investing: diversification. He had bet everything on his favorite child's fiancé, without proper due diligence. "How bad is it?" I asked, though I already knew from industry chatter. "We're ruined," he whispered. "Unless the company can recover." But with the fraud allegations, the investigators froze all company assets this morning. "What about your business reserve funds?" I asked. My father had always boasted about his contingency planning. "Used them as collateral for a loan to give Blake more capital 6 months ago." He sounded defeated. "The bank will call that in now." Over the next 2 weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. My parents were forced to list their home for sale. My father's real estate business overextended, and cash poor began laying off staff. My sister's lavish wedding plans were indefinitely postponed, as Blake faced potential criminal charges. The family facade was crumbling in spectacular fashion. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. "Savannah, honey," my mother's voice had lost its usual imperious tone, replaced by something unfamiliar: desperation. "We need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over for dinner tomorrow night?" I agreed, knowing exactly what they wanted. The stage was set for the next phase of my plan, one that would finally make them see me, truly see me, for the first time in my life. But I wasn't the compliant, overlooked daughter anymore. I was a woman with means, power, and a score to settle. As I hung up the phone, I touched the small photo of James I kept on my desk. "You wouldn't approve of what I'm about to do," I whispered to his smiling face. "But you always said I deserved better from them. Now they'll finally understand what they've lost." I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 7 the following evening, dressed in a simple but expensive black dress, pearls at my neck and wrist, an inheritance from James's aunt, who had loved me more genuinely in 6 years than my own parents had in 32. The house already looked different. Several pieces of art were missing from the walls, and my mother's prized collection of crystal figurines was conspicuously absent from the display cabinet in the foyer. "Savannah, darling." My mother embraced me with unusual warmth, her perfume too strong, her smile too bright. "We've missed you so much." My father stood awkwardly behind her, looking older than I remembered. The confident posture had given way to a slight stoop, and new lines etched his face. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said, using a nickname he hadn't called me since elementary school. Melissa sat at the dining room table, her engagement ring noticeably absent. She avoided my eyes when I entered. Blake was not present. Where's the lucky groom? I asked innocently, setting my purse on a side table. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother cleared her throat. Blake is handling some business matters. Let's eat, shall we? I made your favorite chicken piccata. It wasn't my favorite, it was Melissa's. I'd preferred eggplant parmesan since childhood, a fact James had remembered on our very first dinner date. The small error spoke volumes. We sat down to a tense meal. My mother filled the silence with nervous chatter about neighbors and community gossip, carefully avoiding any mention of finances, Blake's company, or my recent widowhood. My father drank his wine too quickly, refilling his glass 3 times before the main course was served. Finally, as my mother served coffee and a store-bought cheesecake, my father leaned forward. Savannah, we wanted to talk to you about a family matter. He began, his voice attempting its old authoritative tone but falling short. As you know, we've hit a temporary financial setback. The fraud allegations against Blake's company? You mean, I said bluntly. My mother flinched. It's a misunderstanding that will be cleared up soon. Is it, mother? Because from what I've read, Blake falsified research data, stole proprietary code, and misrepresented the company's capabilities to investors. That's not a misunderstanding, it's criminal behavior. You don't know the whole story, Melissa spoke up, her voice sharp with defensiveness. Blake was pressured by the board. He made some mistakes, but you mean the board that consisted of him, his college roommate, and dad? I interrupted. That board. Melissa fell silent, tears welling in her eyes. My father cleared his throat. Regardless of how things appear, we're facing a temporary cash flow issue. The bank has called in several loans, and we need to secure interim financing to weather this storm. And you want my help, I stated flatly. We're family, Savannah, my mother said, reaching across to clasp my hand. I resisted the urge to pull away. Family helps each other through difficult times. We thought, perhaps, with James's life insurance. She let the sentence trail off delicately. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moment stretch uncomfortably. James's life insurance, I repeated. I imagine it must be a substantial sum, my father said. With his position at the firm. It was, I agreed. But what makes you think I'd use a penny of it to help you? The stunned silence that followed was almost comical. My mother's perfectly Botoxed forehead attempted to wrinkle in confusion. Savannah, we're your parents, she finally said, as if that simple fact should override everything else. My parents, I echoed. The same parents who chose to attend an engagement party instead of supporting their daughter at her husband's funeral. Those parents. That's not fair, my father began. We had commitments to everyone except me, I finished for him. That's been the pattern my entire life, hasn't it? You've never once put me first. Not once. That's not true, my mother protested. We've always loved both our daughters equally. I laughed, then a sound so genuine it surprised even me. Mother, you've never even known what my favorite food is. You've been serving me Melissa's preferences for 32 years, convinced they were mine. Looking directly into their eyes, I delivered the truth they'd never been willing to see. When James was diagnosed, do you know what he said to me? He said his greatest regret was that he couldn't protect me from my own family forever. He always saw how you treated me as an afterthought, a backup plan, the responsible daughter who would eventually be useful when Melissa's dreams needed financing. I stood up, smoothing my dress. But here's what you never bothered to discover about me. James and I were successful, very successful. We made smart investments while you were throwing money at Melissa's latest whim. That temporary cash flow problem you're experiencing, I could solve it with a single phone call. My father's eyes widened. Savannah, if you have resources as your father, I'm asking. You lost the right to ask me for anything when you chose a party over standing beside me at my husband's grave. I cut him off. But I'm curious, how much do you need to avoid complete financial ruin? $2 million would cover the immediate debts, my father said, hope creeping into his voice. We could repay you once I have 5 million, I stated plainly. The room went completely still. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. 5 million, Melissa whispered. A recent investment paid off spectacularly, I explained. James and I were planning to start a family with it. Now that future is gone, but the money remains. Savannah, that's wonderful news, my mother said, her entire demeanor shifting. You must be so. I'm not giving you the money, I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. But I am going to let you sit with the knowledge that I could save you but won't. Just like you could have supported me when I needed you most, but chose not to. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. I should go. I have an early meeting tomorrow with the foundation I'm establishing in James's name. The James Westbrook Memorial Scholarship will help underprivileged students pursue careers in finance, continuing his legacy of helping others build secure futures. I turned back one last time to see my family's stunned faces. Oh, and if you're wondering where you might watch my story unfold, you won't believe the incredible community I've found online that's helped me through this difficult time. If you're watching this now and have ever felt undervalued by the people who should love you most, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of family dynamics and justice served. I share new content weekly about rebuilding your life after betrayal. Now let's continue with what happened next. The days following the dinner confrontation were surprisingly peaceful. I had expected a barrage of calls and texts from my family, pleas, accusations, guilt trips, but instead there was silence. Complete radio silence, as if they were regrouping, strategizing their next approach. I used this time to focus on establishing James's foundation, working with our lawyer to create a structure that would honor his passion for helping others achieve financial security. 1 week after the dinner, my office phone rang. I recognized the number of my parents' home. Savannah Montgomery, I answered professionally. It's Dad, my father said, his voice subdued. Do you have a moment to talk? I'm between meetings, so make it quick, I replied, though my calendar was actually clear for the afternoon. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, the words coming slowly, as if they were difficult to form. About what you said. About how we've treated you over the years. I remained silent, waiting. I went through some old family albums last night, he continued. Looking at pictures of you growing up. There's one of your science fair in 6th grade. You won first place with that project about compound interest. I remembered that day vividly. I had worked for weeks on the project, creating elaborate charts showing how small investments could grow over time. My parents had sent the housekeeper to the ceremony because they were attending Melissa's dance recital. I wasn't there, my father acknowledged, as if reading my thoughts. I've missed so many important moments in your life, Savannah. We both have, your mother and I. Yes, you have, I agreed, offering nothing more. He sighed heavily. I'm not calling to ask for money. I wanted you to know that we're selling the vacation house in Martha's Vineyard and liquidating your mother's jewelry collection. It won't cover everything, but it's a start. This surprised me. The Martha's Vineyard house had been my parents' pride and joy, the symbol of their arrival in high society. What about Melissa and Blake? I asked. Blake's been arrested, my father said flatly. Securities fraud, wire fraud, the works. Melissa's devastated, of course, but she's also. He hesitated. She's angry with us. Says we pushed her into the relationship because we were impressed by his Harvard background and startup success. Says we never let her figure out what she really wanted. I raised my eyebrows, though he couldn't see me. This was an unexpected development. Melissa, my perpetually coddled sister, was blaming our parents. That's quite a change in perspective, I remarked. She moved out 3 days ago, my father continued. Got a job waitressing at that cafe near the library. Says she needs to support herself for once. I was genuinely stunned. Melissa had never worked a service job in her life. Dad, why are you telling me this? There was a long pause. Because I owe you an apology, Savannah. A massive life-sized apology that probably comes too late. We failed you as parents. We took your strength and independence as a sign that you needed less from us, when in reality we should have celebrated those qualities instead of taking them for granted." Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. These were words I'd wanted to hear for decades. "When you said James worried about protecting you from your own family, it hit me like a truck," my father continued, his voice cracking. "What kind of father am I that my daughter's husband felt he needed to shield her from us?" I swallowed hard. A father who showed consistent favoritism her entire life. "Yes," he agreed simply. "And I'm so damn sorry, Savannah. Not because we need your money. Not because we're in trouble. But because you deserved better, always. I see that now." I closed my eyes, unsure how to process this apparent epiphany. Was it genuine or another manipulation? "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But words are easy, Dad. Actions are what matter." "I know," he replied. "Which is why I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted you to know that your words at dinner, they got through. For whatever that's worth now." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring out the window at the Manhattan skyline. Part of me wanted to believe my father's apparent change of heart. A larger part remained skeptical, hardened by years of disappointment. That evening, I received a text from Melissa. "Can we meet for coffee? Just us, please." I agreed to meet her the following day at a small cafe near my office. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the designer clothing and perfect blowout. My sister wore jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, but also more substantial. "Thanks for coming," she said, as I sat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. She nodded, accepting this. "I deserve that. I've been a terrible sister." "Yes, you have," I agreed, not making this easy for her. Melissa took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry about James. He was a good man. And I'm sorry I wasn't at the funeral. That was unforgivable." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulative tactics she'd learned from our mother, but saw only genuine remorse. "Why did you want to meet, Melissa?" She twisted her coffee cup nervously. "I found out something. About Blake's company. About Mom and Dad's investment." She looked up at me, her eyes troubled. "They didn't just invest in Blake's startup because of me, Savannah. They did it because Blake promised them he could triple their money in 6 months. They were planning to use that profit to set up a trust fund for my future children, while cutting you out of their will entirely." I felt as if all the air had been sucked from my lungs. "What I found the paperwork in Dad's home office when I was packing my things," Melissa continued, her voice shaking. "A draft of their new will. It specified that their estate would be divided between me and any children I might have. You weren't mentioned at all." The revelation shouldn't have hurt. I'd known for years that I was the lesser child in their eyes, but it did. Deeply. "Mom told me once when she was drunk at Christmas 2 years ago that they never really wanted a second child," Melissa said, looking down at the table. "That you were an accident, but they made the best of it. An accident." The word echoed in my mind, confirming what I'd always suspected on some level. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Melissa replied. "And because I need you to understand that I'm not them, Savannah. I've been spoiled and selfish and entitled my whole life, but these past weeks have been illuminating. Blake used me to get to our parents' money. Our parents used me to live out their social ambitions. And I let them because it was easier than figuring out who I actually am." She reached across the table, not quite touching me. "I don't expect us to suddenly become best friends. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I see it all clearly now, how they treated you, how I benefited from it, how wrong it all was. And I'm making changes in my life." I regarded my sister carefully, this new version of her, that seemed more genuine than any I'd known before. "What kind of changes?" "I'm going back to school," she said with a small smile. "Community college, starting with basic business classes. I want to understand money, how to earn it, manage it, respect it. I've relied on others to support me for too long. Despite myself, I felt a glimmer of respect for her. That's good, Melissa. I don't want or expect anything from you, she added quickly. I just thought you should know about the will, and that I'm sorry, truly sorry. As I walked back to my office after our meeting, I felt strangely lighter. The pain of my parents' ultimate betrayal, planning to erase me from their legacy entirely, was counterbalanced by this unexpected alliance with my sister. For the first time, Melissa had chosen truth over convenience, chosen me over our parents' narrative. That night, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I called my lawyer and instructed him to make a change to the foundation I was establishing in James's memory. 3 days after my coffee with Melissa, news of Blake's arrest hit the local papers. The story was even worse than I'd initially thought. He had defrauded investors of nearly $15 million, using elaborate fake demonstrations and falsified data to create the illusion of a revolutionary technology. My parents were named as major investors who had lost a substantial portion of their net worth in the scheme. The social fallout was immediate and brutal. The same community that had celebrated my parents' success for decades now whispered about their gullibility and poor judgment. Longtime friends suddenly had scheduling conflicts when my mother tried to arrange lunch dates. My father's remaining business clients began quietly transferring their accounts to competitors. I kept my distance, watching it all unfold from afar. Part of me, the wounded child who had always been second best, felt a grim satisfaction in their downfall. Another part, perhaps the part influenced by James's fundamental decency, felt a surprising twinge of compassion for them. They were flawed, selfish people, but they were also aging, scared, and facing the collapse of everything they had built. 2 weeks after the scandal broke, my father suffered a minor heart attack. I learned about it not from my mother but from Melissa, who called me from the hospital. "He's stable," she assured me. But it was scary. "Mom's a mess." I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish physical harm on my father. "He's been asking for you," Melissa said, hesitantly. "I told him I'd call, but I understand completely if you don't want to come." I closed my eyes, conflicted. "I'll think about it." After hanging up, I paced my apartment, the one James and I had shared, now feeling too big and empty without him. What would James advise me to do in this situation? He had always been my moral compass, tempering my justified anger with his innate compassion. "They don't deserve your forgiveness," I said aloud to his photograph on the mantel. But maybe that's not the point. I drove to the hospital that evening more for my own peace of mind than for my parents'. My mother was asleep in a chair beside my father's bed when I arrived, looking older and smaller than I remembered. My father's complexion was gray, oxygen tubes in his nose monitors beeping steadily beside him. I sat quietly in the other visitor chair, not waking either of them. After about 30 minutes, my father's eyes fluttered open. He looked disoriented at first, then focused on me with surprise. "Savannah," his voice was weak, raspy. "You came." "I did," I acknowledged. My mother stirred at the sound of voices, her eyes widening when she saw me. "Savannah, oh thank goodness." She reached for my hand and I let her take it, though I didn't squeeze back. "How are you feeling, Dad?" I asked. Like an elephant sat on my chest, he tried to joke, then grew serious. "But lucky. Doctor says it was a warning, not the main event." "That's good," I said awkwardly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit from my childhood. "I need to say something," my father finally spoke. "While I still can." "Richard, you're going to be fine," my mother interjected. "Don't talk like that." He ignored her, his eyes fixed on mine. "Savannah, your mother and I made a terrible mistake with the new will. We were blinded by Blake's promises and our own preferences." He paused, struggling for breath. "It was wrong. Deeply wrong." And I'm ashamed. I nodded, acknowledging his words without offering absolution. We've lost nearly everything, he continued. The house will be sold at auction next month. The business is bankrupt. We're looking at apartments in assisted living facilities. I know, I said quietly. We don't deserve your help, he added. I want to be clear about that. What we did was unforgivable. My mother made a small sound of distress but didn't contradict him. I looked between them, these flawed aging people who had given me life but so little else. I've made some decisions, I said finally. I'd like to tell you about them. They both looked at me with apprehension, perhaps expecting a final severing of ties. The James Westbrook Memorial Foundation launches next week, I began. Its primary mission is to provide financial education and support to young people from difficult backgrounds, but it has a secondary purpose as well. I took a deep breath. The foundation will purchase your house at fair market value, clearing your debts with the bank. You'll be permitted to live there until, I hesitated, then continued, until other arrangements become necessary. A monthly stipend will be provided for basic living expenses. My parents stared at me in shock. Savannah, my mother whispered. Why would you do this? After everything, I met her gaze steadily. Not for you, Mother. For me. Because carrying hatred is exhausting, and James wouldn't want that for me. We can't accept, my father began. You can and you will, I interrupted, because the foundation's work requires case studies of financial mistakes to avoid. You'll both serve as guest speakers for the foundation's seminars, sharing your story as a cautionary tale for others. You'll explain exactly how prioritizing appearances and favoritism led to financial and personal ruin. My father's face flushed with humiliation, but he nodded slowly. That's fair. It's more than fair, I corrected him. It's merciful. Which is something you never taught me, but James did. My mother was openly crying now. And Melissa Melissa has declined any financial support, I said, feeling a surprising pride in my sister. She's accepted a position as an administrative assistant at the foundation once she completes her business certificate. She'll be working her way up from the bottom on her own merit. I stood, having said what I came to say. The foundation lawyers will be in touch with the paperwork. In the meantime, focus on getting better, Dad. As I turned to leave, my father called out, Savannah, wait. I need to know. Can you ever forgive us? I paused at the door, considering the question carefully. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I'm willing to try to move forward. That's all I can offer right now. 1 year after James's death, I stood in the gleaming lobby of the James Westbrook Memorial Foundation's headquarters in downtown Hartford. What had begun as an idea born from grief and righteous anger had evolved into something truly meaningful, a thriving organization that had already helped dozens of young people secure financial education and stability. The foundation's first annual fundraising gala was scheduled for that evening. Donors, community leaders, and program participants would gather to celebrate our accomplishments and raise funds for expansion. Among the invited guests were my parents and Melissa, a reunion of sorts that filled me with complicated emotions. The past year had been transformative for all of us. My parents, humbled by their fall from grace, had embraced their new roles with surprising dedication. My father, fully recovered from his heart attack, had become particularly passionate about warning others against the dangers of financial favoritism and impulsive investing. His candid presentations about how he had nearly destroyed his family through poor choices resonated deeply with audiences. My mother, initially more resistant to public admission of failure, had eventually found purpose in mentoring young women about financial independence. Melissa had thrived in ways none of us could have predicted. Starting as an administrative assistant at the foundation, she had quickly demonstrated an aptitude for program development. She was currently taking night classes to complete a business degree, funding her education entirely on her own. The entitled girl I had grown up with had been replaced by a hardworking woman, determined to stand on her own merits. As for me, the foundation had become my salvation, a way to channel my grief into purpose. I had preserved the $5 million as the endowment that would ensure James's legacy lived on. I'd also returned to dating recently, meeting a kind pediatrician named David through a foundation event. It was early days, but for the first time since losing James, I could imagine a future that included love again. "Everything looks perfect," said Michael Greenberg, our foundation's legal counsel and my longtime friend, as he joined me in surveying the lobby's transformation for the evening's event. "James would be so proud, Savannah." I smiled, feeling the familiar pang whenever James's name was mentioned, but now it was accompanied by a sense of peace, rather than just raw grief. "I think he would be. Especially of how the family programs have developed." Our foundation had become known for its unique approach to financial education, engaging entire families rather than just individuals, healing financial wounds across generations. The irony that this model had emerged from my own family's dysfunction wasn't lost on me. "Your parents arrived early," Michael mentioned. "They're helping the volunteers with the seating arrangements." "Of course they are," I said with a small laugh. My mother's event planning skills, once directed toward superficial social climbing, had found a better purpose in our community outreach events. I found them in the main ballroom, my mother fussing over centerpieces, while my father carefully arranged place cards. They looked up as I approached, both smiling tentatively. "Savannah," my mother said, embracing me lightly. Our relationship remained cautious, but the poisonous resentment had gradually dissipated over months of structured interaction. "Everything looks beautiful. You've done an amazing job." "Thanks, Mom," I replied. "I appreciate your help today." My father stood back, observing us with what looked like wonder. "Sometimes I can't believe this is where we've ended up," he said quietly. After everything, I understood what he meant. None of us could have predicted this outcome when we sat across from each other at that devastating dinner a year ago. The journey from that night to this moment had been painful, complicated, and ultimately healing in ways I couldn't have imagined. "Life rarely goes as planned," I said, thinking of James, of the future we'd lost, and the unexpected purpose I'd found. "Sometimes that's terrible. And sometimes it forces us to build something better from the ruins." Melissa joined us, then clipboard in hand, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to her former self. "The first guests will arrive in 30 minutes, she reported, "and the speaker from the community college wants to know if she can add a slide to her presentation." As my sister and parents fell into a discussion about logistical details, I stepped away to a quiet corner of the ballroom. I took out my phone and pulled up a photo of James and me on our honeymoon, his arm around my shoulders as we stood on a beach at sunset. "We did it, love," I whispered to his smiling image. "Something good came from all the pain." That evening, as I stood at the podium addressing a room full of supporters, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me for so long. The James Westbrook Memorial Foundation was born from personal tragedy, I told the audience. But it has grown into something that transcends its origins. We've helped 28 families achieve financial stability this year. We've provided scholarships to 43 students pursuing financial education. And perhaps most importantly, we've created a community where honesty about money, its power, its pitfalls, and its potential has replaced shame and secrecy. I looked directly at my parents and sister seated at a front table. We've also proven that it's never too late to rebuild family bonds on a foundation of truth rather than appearances. Never too late to acknowledge past mistakes and work toward genuine healing. As applause filled the room, I felt a weight lifting the last remnants of bitterness I'd carried for so long. The money that my parents had once sought to control had ultimately transformed all our lives, but not in the way any of us had expected. The $5 million hadn't just secured my financial future, it had bought something far more valuable, the truth and the opportunity to build something meaningful from it. Later that night, as the last guests departed, my family gathered in my office for a quiet moment together. My father raised a glass of sparkling cider, having given up alcohol after his heart attack. To James, he said solemnly, "For loving our daughter better than we did and showing us through his legacy what family should truly mean." To James we echoed, and in that moment I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The justice I had once sought had evolved into something more powerful than revenge could ever be: redemption. As my family prepared to leave, I thought about all of you who might be watching this story unfold. If my journey has resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should value you most, or if you're struggling to transform pain into purpose, I hope you'll take away this truth: sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't cutting people off, but showing them exactly what they failed to see in you. If you've experienced family karma or justice in your own life, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it touched something in you, subscribe to my channel for more authentic family stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you so much for listening to my family revenge story and the life lessons I've learned. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better and building something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost.